Welcome, dear listeners, to a world of wonder and calm. Take a deep breath, find a cozy spot, and let the day's worries melt away. Whether you're preparing for a peaceful night's rest or simply in need of a moment to unwind, you're in the right place. Here, you'll journey through stories filled with magic, warmth, and soothing adventures. Allow yourself to relax, drift into a dream, and let the calming rhythm of this tale guide you to a peaceful, restful place. Close your eyes, open your heart, and let the story begin. In a quiet village, nestled between rolling hills and endless fields of wildflowers, there was a place not many knew about, a place where time seemed to slow down and the world felt a little softer. It wasn't on any map, and it wasn't something most villagers thought about. But those who did know of it would speak in hushed tones, often with a twinkle in their eye and a smile that seemed to hold a secret. The garden had always been there, hidden just out of reach. It was known only to a few, a gentle, elusive place. The gate that led to it was old and covered in ivy, so thick that even the light of day could hardly pierce through. No one knew who had built it, and no one knew where the key was. The gate stood, waiting for the right person, someone who would find it not by force, but by heart. Lily was a curious young girl, often caught daydreaming, her thoughts drifting far away from the ordinary life she lived in the village. She was the kind of person who saw things others didn't. While the other children ran through the fields or played in the streets, Lily would find herself staring at the clouds, the way they shifted and changed, or watching the way the leaves danced in the wind. One warm spring morning, as she wandered near the outskirts of the village, she came across an old stone wall, half hidden behind clusters of wildflowers. The wall was forgotten, but Lily's keen eyes caught a glimpse of something through a gap in the stones. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but she could see the outline of an iron gate, twisted with vines. Her heart skipped a beat. It was the gate to the secret garden. Lily stepped closer, her hand instinctively reaching out to touch the cool iron. The vines seemed to shift under her fingers, as if welcoming her. She pushed, but the gate didn't move. It was locked. Her mind raced. She had to know what lay beyond it. It wasn't just curiosity. It was something deeper, something that called to her. She turned and ran back to the village, not knowing exactly where she was going, but determined to find the key. As she passed the village square, she noticed the old bookshop tucked away in the corner of a narrow street. The shop was small, its wooden sign creaking in the breeze. It had always intrigued her, but today something felt different. She felt a pull, like the shop was waiting for her. With a hesitant breath, Lily pushed open the door. The bell above it jingled softly, and a musty scent of old paper and wood filled her senses. The shelves were lined with dusty books, some so old that the covers had faded to nearly nothing. At the far end of the shop stood an elderly man, his silver hair neatly combed, his glasses perched on the tip of his nose. He looked up from a book he was reading and smiled warmly. "Ah, a curious soul," he said, his voice soft and warm like a gentle breeze. "What brings you here, young one?" Lily's heart raced. "I've seen something," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "A gate, hidden in the village. I think it's the gate to a secret garden. Do you know of it?" The old man studied her for a long moment, his eyes twinkling with something she couldn't quite place. "Ah," he said, nodding slowly, "I know the one you speak of. But the garden, my dear, is not something you can simply walk into. It is a place of peace, of stillness. a place that can only be found when you are ready. Lily frowned, feeling a mix of confusion and hope. How can I be ready? How can I find the garden? The old man's smile deepened. He slowly stood and walked to a shelf at the back of the shop, pulling out an old, leather-bound book. Its cover was faded, but the gold letters on the spine still gleamed. "This," he said, handing it to her, "is the key you seek. Not a key made of metal, but one made of heart." Lily held the book in her hands. It felt heavy, but in a way that comforted her. The pages were thick, and the paper had a texture that felt ancient, yet somehow new. The old man's voice was gentle as he spoke again. "Open your heart, child, and listen. The key will reveal itself to you when you are ready. The garden is waiting, but you must find a way within yourself." Lily nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure what he meant. But something about his words resonated with her, like a soft bell ringing in her chest. With the book in hand, Lily left the shop, the sun shining brighter than ever as she stepped back into the village. The gate was still locked, but now she knew there was more to it than just finding a physical key. The journey, the discovery, had only just begun. Lily walked back through the village, her mind swirling with the old man's words. "The key will reveal itself to you when you are ready." What did that mean? She wasn't sure, but the book in her hands felt like more than just a simple object. It felt like a promise, a guide. As she passed through the village square, she could feel the weight of the book pulling her thoughts deeper. She wondered what secrets it held. The golden letters on its spine shimmered slightly as if beckoning her. The air around her seemed to hum with energy, and Lily couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching over her. When she reached her little cottage, tucked in the corner of the village, she opened the door and stepped inside. The room was small but cozy, with a fire crackling softly in the hearth. The scent of warm bread from the bakery next door wafted through the open window, mixing with the earthy aroma of the garden just outside. Lily walked to the small wooden table where she often sat and carefully placed the book in front of her. She hesitated for a moment, looking at its worn cover. The pages seemed to shimmer with an ancient energy that she couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just the weight of the book that felt significant. It was the feeling of being drawn into its story, its world. Taking a deep breath, she opened the first page. The words were written in elegant, flowing script. The ink faded but still legible. The first passage was a poem. "The garden's key is found in stillness, where time and breath are intertwined. To seek the path, you must first listen, for only then the garden you'll find." Lily read the words aloud, her voice soft, and as she did, something strange happened. The room seemed to quiet, as if the world outside had paused. The sounds of birds and the rustling of trees faded, leaving behind only the soft crackle of the fire. She felt a sudden calm wash over her, and in that stillness her thoughts became clearer. The next page revealed more. It wasn't just a poem now, but a story. It told of an ancient garden, one that grew outside the realm of time, a garden that appeared only to those who sought peace with an open heart. It spoke of the gate, the ivy-covered door that was always waiting, but hidden until the seeker was ready. Lily turned the pages slowly, reading each word as if they were keys unlocking parts of her soul. With every sentence, she felt more connected to the garden, as though it were calling to her, urging her to find the path. After a while, Lily began to notice a pattern. Each page contained a riddle or a question. The answers weren't obvious, but she could feel that the garden itself was teaching her how to listen, how to quiet the noise in her mind and trust her instincts. "What is the sound of the wind when it touches the earth?" one page asked. "Where does the sun go when it sets, and why does it return?" These questions seemed so simple, but their answers were not. Lily sat quietly, her fingers tracing the words on the page as she pondered each one. She understood now. It wasn't about finding the right answers. It was about letting go of the need to know and simply listening to the world around her. Hours passed, but Lily didn't notice. The light outside began to fade, and the first stars of the evening appeared in the sky. She sat back, the book now closed in her lap. A deep sense of peace had settled over her, and though she hadn't solved all the riddles, she knew something important. The garden was not just a place. It was a feeling, a way of being. As she stood to prepare for bed, the book tucked under her arm, she felt the pull of something new. The garden was within her reach, not in the distance, but in the quiet of her heart. Tomorrow she would find a gate, but today she had discovered the first step. The next morning, Lily woke before dawn. The quiet was still heavy in the air, as though the entire world was holding its breath. She had barely slept the night before, her mind swirling with the words from the book, the riddles, the lessons that seemed to be unfolding with each passing moment. As the first rays of sunlight began to peek through her window, she felt an undeniable sense of urgency to begin her journey. She quickly dressed in soft, worn clothes, comfortably loose so she could move freely. The air was crisp as she stepped outside, the village still asleep around her. She clutched the book tightly in her hands, as if it held the key to the world itself. The morning mist lingered over the fields, and the birds hadn't yet begun their song. But there was something different about the way the world felt this morning, expectant, as if it were ready to reveal itself. Lily knew the first step of the journey was finding the gate. The path wasn't clear, but she had faith that if she listened closely, if she let go of her doubts, she would find her way. She walked through the village, heading towards the old stone wall where she had seen the gate the day before. As she passed familiar houses, she noticed how they looked different in the early light. The garden, the fields, and even the sky. It was all full of possibility. It was as if every object in her world was shimmering with potential, as if every moment was pregnant with meaning. When she reached the stone wall, Lily stopped. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, just as the book had taught her. The world around her seemed to slow, and she could hear the soft rustle of leaves in the distance. The garden was waiting, and in that stillness, she knew she was ready to see it. With quiet determination, she moved along the wall, her fingers brushing against the cool stone. There, hidden among the ivy, was the gate, just as she had seen it before. It was waiting for her. But now, something was different. The gate wasn't locked anymore. It was as though the very act of her being here had unlocked it. The vines shifted, parting just enough to allow her passage. The soft, golden light from the sun glinted off the iron bars, and Lily stepped forward, her heart pounding with excitement. She placed her hand on the gate, and it opened effortlessly, as though it had been waiting for her touch. The world beyond was just as magical as she had imagined. The garden stretched out before her, a labyrinth of paths lined with flowers and trees that seemed to reach out to her. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine, lavender, and something she couldn't quite name. It was peaceful, tranquil, but there was an underlying feeling of something more, something deep. Lily stepped through the gate and onto the soft earth of the garden. The moment her foot touched the ground, she felt a shift inside herself. The world seemed to pulse around her, a slow, steady rhythm. It was as though the very air was alive with energy, and she was a part of it. She stood for a moment, taking in her surroundings. The garden was vast, with tall, ancient trees that seemed to stretch forever, their leaves glowing faintly. Vines wrapped around the trunks, and flowers of every color bloomed in the soft morning light. There was a stillness here, a quiet that was different from any silence she had known before. It was peaceful, yes, but it was also filled with possibility. Lily walked deeper into the garden, the path winding gently around trees and bushes. The further she went, the more she felt connected to everything. It wasn't just the beauty that filled her. It was something else, something intangible. The garden, she realized, was teaching her to listen to the silence, to feel the connection between all things. As she wandered, she came to a small clearing, where a crystal-clear pond shimmered in the sunlight. The water was so still it looked like a mirror. The surface was so perfect, it seemed as if the sky above was reflected in its depths. Lily crouched by the edge, gazing into the water, and for a moment she felt as though she could see everything. Her heart, her dreams, the world around her. It was all reflected in the water, and it was all connected. It was in that moment that she understood. The garden was not just a place. It was a way of being, a state of mind. It wasn't just about finding the gate or the path. It was about finding herself, and in doing so, becoming part of something greater. Lily smiled to herself, feeling the quiet joy of discovery. She wasn't alone here. The garden was with her, and she was with it, and in the silence she had found peace. Lily stood at the edge of the pond, the cool breeze brushing against her cheeks, and she could feel the garden's pulse beneath her feet. There was a strange, comforting hum in the air, as if the very earth itself was breathing in time with her. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of meaning. It was as though the garden was trying to communicate with her, speaking in ways that words couldn't express. She took a step back from the water and looked around, her gaze lingering on the twisted trees and delicate flowers. Each plant seemed to be reaching out to her, each one telling a story she didn't quite understand, yet somehow felt deeply connected to. There were no clear paths here, no roads to follow. Instead, it was as though the garden shifted with every movement she made. The trees bent toward her, their leaves whispering softly in the breeze. The flowers opened in response to her presence, their petals shimmering with soft, golden light. Feeling an overwhelming sense of peace, Lily began to walk again, her feet light on the earth, as if the ground itself was supporting her every step. She didn't know where she was going. There was no need for that. She simply let the rhythm of the garden guide her, the faint rustling of leaves and the distant sound of birds acting as her only direction. It wasn't long before she found herself standing before an ancient oak tree, its trunk thick and knotted, its roots stretching deep into the ground like veins. The tree was massive, towering above everything around it, its branches sprawling across the sky, casting long shadows on the soft, moss-covered ground. At its base, nestled among the roots, was a small door, almost hidden by the undergrowth. It was the kind of door one would almost miss, as if it was waiting for the right person to notice it. Lily crouched down and touched the door's surface. The wood was old, but it felt warm under her fingers. There was no handle, no keyhole, just a smooth, weathered surface. She ran her hand over it, trying to make sense of what she was feeling, when suddenly a soft voice echoed in her mind. The path you seek lies within, but to enter, You must be willing to leave behind all that you think you know. The voice was gentle, not loud, but so clear and certain that Lily felt its weight. It wasn't the kind of voice one could ignore. She knew the moment she heard it that it wasn't just a thought, but the garden itself speaking to her, guiding her toward something deeper, something hidden. She stood up, taking a step back from the door. The words echoed in her mind. Leave behind all that you think you know. What did that mean? She had so many questions, but somehow she knew the answers wouldn't come through logic. This journey wasn't about finding answers. It was about experiencing the unknown, trusting in what she couldn't see. Lily took a deep breath and closed her eyes, letting the stillness wash over her again. She needed to let go of her fear, her doubts, and everything she had carried with her. Only then would the door open. She stood there for a long time, allowing the silence to guide her thoughts. The garden was teaching her patience. It was teaching her that sometimes the most important thing was to simply wait, to listen. When she opened her eyes again, the door was no longer there. Lily blinked in surprise. She had only looked away for a moment, but the door had disappeared, as though it had never been there in the first place. The oak tree now stood untouched, its massive branches casting long shadows in the fading light. A wave of understanding washed over her. The garden was not a place that could be controlled or understood through mere thought. It wasn't a puzzle to be solved. It was an experience to be lived, a journey to be taken, moment by moment. The door would reveal itself when the time was right. For now, she needed to let go of her expectations and simply be. She turned away from the oak tree and began walking again, this time with a lighter heart. The path before her was unclear, but that didn't matter anymore. She knew the garden was watching over her, guiding her, and all she had to do was trust in the quiet whisper of the wind and the soft hum of the earth beneath her feet. In the distance, a new path emerged, a trail of golden flowers that seemed to glow in the twilight. Lily smiled, feeling the pull to continue. She had not found what she expected, but she had found something far more precious, the wisdom of the garden, hidden in its silence, waiting for her to understand. The golden flowers beckoned her forward, their petals soft and luminous in the gathering dusk. The path they created seemed endless, winding and twisting through the heart of the garden, leading her deeper into the mysterious realm. Lily felt no fear. Instead, there was an overwhelming sense of curiosity, of knowing that this was exactly where she was meant to be. Every step seemed to echo in harmony with her heartbeat, the earth beneath her feet like a steady drumbeat urging her on. As she walked, the garden around her began to change. The trees, though still ancient and towering, appeared to thin out, their trunks becoming more sparse and the leaves lighter, almost translucent. The air was growing warmer, tinged with a sweet, golden light that bathed everything in a soft glow. It was as if the sun was setting in the distance, casting its last rays across a landscape she had never seen before. And yet, there was no sun, just a light that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. The path ahead grew clearer, revealing a vast open space that seemed to stretch infinitely. The flowers now glowed brighter, their golden hue turning to a soft, radiant white, as if welcoming her to something beyond the garden. At the center of this clearing stood a single, towering figure, an immense, radiant tree. Its trunk was white as marble, with veins of gold running through its bark, pulsing gently as if it had a heartbeat of its own. The branches stretched high above, blooming with iridescent flowers that shimmered in the ethereal light. It was the most beautiful thing Lily had ever seen, and it seemed to call to her. Without thinking, She moved toward the tree. As she approached, a soft breeze swirled around her, carrying with it the scent of roses and earth, of memories long forgotten. She placed her hand on the smooth bark, and instantly she felt a deep connection to the tree, as though it was welcoming her, as though it had been waiting for her arrival all along. The moment her hand touched the tree, a voice, a soft, warm voice, spoke in her mind. "You have found the heart of the garden, Lily. Here, you are one with everything. Here, you are home." The voice was not threatening or loud. It was gentle, as though it had always been there, waiting for her to listen. She closed her eyes, feeling the truth of the words resonate deep within her, and the stillness. Lily understood. This was not just a place of magic. It was a reflection of her own heart, her own soul. The garden, the tree, the very light that filled the air. It all came from within her, a part of the essence of who she was. She had been searching for answers outside herself, but now she realized that everything she had ever needed was already inside her, waiting to be discovered. The tree's voice continued. "The journey you have undertaken was never about finding the right path, but about understanding the path within you. You are the keeper of this garden, as much as it is a part of you. The silence you have heard is not emptiness. It is the quiet space where the soul can truly hear its own truth." Lily stood there, her hands still resting on the bark, feeling a deep, profound peace settle over her. There was no need for more answers, no need to seek anything else. Everything was as it should be. The tree shimmered with light, and suddenly Lily felt herself filled with warmth. She wasn't just standing beside it, she was becoming part of it. The golden light from the flowers above flowed down into her, merging with her being. She was the light. She was the tree. She was the garden. She opened her eyes and looked around. The landscape had changed again, though in ways she couldn't fully explain. The garden had expanded, stretching out into an infinite horizon. She was no longer bound by the paths, but free to wander, to explore, to be part of everything. And in that moment, Lily knew that she would never leave this place. The garden was within her. It was always within her. The wind picked up, lifting her hair as it carried the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of life all around her. It was a sound of eternity, a sound of peace, of home. Lily smiled and took a deep breath, feeling the light of the garden fill her soul. She was whole, and the journey she had taken was not one of discovery, but of remembrance. The garden had always been with her, and it always would be. With a heart full of peace, Lily stepped forward, her spirit free, and the garden whispered its eternal welcome. Thank you for joining me on this peaceful journey. I hope the story has brought you a sense of calm and tranquility, leaving you ready to embrace a restful night or a moment of serenity. Until we meet again, may your dreams be filled with wonder and your heart with peace. Take care, and remember, the magic is always just a story away.